The St. Louis Blues, Stanley Cup champions in 2019. Good job, because if they hadn't won the Cup last year, this video would be a whole lot more depressing. So there's some teams have got to their lowest points, and it's been, well, these are some bad records they had. Other than that, franchise is pretty stable. Franchise stability plays a major role in this. St. Louis, boy howdy. I've got Keenan in the upper corner there because, of course, the Mike Keenan era, not one that Blues fans want to remember and don't remember fondly. And yet, it's hard not to talk about the 1983 fiasco. So, in December of 1982, rumors reached hockey players for the St. Louis Blues that maybe the team's going to move to Saskatoon. They might be the Saskatoon Blues the next season. And whether or not it distracts them, it's up to you guys to decide whether or not that's a believable reason for the 25, 40, and 15 record, which was miserably bad. This was a team that was right down near the bottom of the standings, and they were not very good, and it was a franchise that was looking to be sold. They had some debts, and so if Ralston Purina could sell this team, I don't think they necessarily cared. So they sold it to a Saskatoon business interest, and the announcement was made that Saskatoon would break ground on a building that would be good to go in time for the team to get there. They envisioned having 18,000 fans in attendance, and so the Saskatoon Blues were on their way until the Board of Governors sat down and met. May 18th of 1983, 15 owners said no. 3 of them said, sure, go ahead, and the other 3 abstained. 75% of the NHL has to agree with the sale to move a team. And they said no. They've vetoed the sale. So the owner of the Blues loses his mind at that. Says, no, that's wrong. And he's suing the NHL for antitrust. And I'm selling the team. It's my team. I can sell it if I want. And also in protest, they're like, we're not going to the draft in 1983. This is a really bad idea. Really, really, really bad idea. And the number 5 overall pick is where they would have drafted. Barrasso was picked in that spot. They also could have picked John McLean, and they could have picked Cam Neely. Those are 3 pretty good players. And at number 27, where they would have drafted in the second round, Sergio Momesso was drafted in that spot. Oddly enough, Momesso becomes a Blue later, but they could have just drafted him. Then they wouldn't have had to go out and get him. But he was drafted by the Montreal Canadiens. So for St. Louis in 1983, things looked bad. And I remember thinking the team was going to Saskatoon. I remember there being a lot of excitement in Canada about, hey, we're going to have a team in Saskatchewan. This will be great. You got Winnipeg, Saskatoon, Calgary, Edmonton, and Vancouver. This is going to be awesome. And then the NHL went, no, we're not. No. And this is before Bettman. So this can't get blamed on Bettman. I guess you can try. But you can't really blame it on Bettman. This was a matter of the Blues saying, we'd like to move, and the NHL saying, no. So they found a different buyer. And things worked out pretty darn well for St. Louis after that. They got their stability, and they made some money, and now they're a Stanley Cup champion from 2019. And there you go. Now, most losses for any goaltender in their history, Mike Liut with 133. I am surprised at the low numbers for goaltenders with St. Louis. I'm always surprised when I look at this because I don't think of St. Louis as a team that's gone through a lot of goalies, and yet here we are. They have gone through a lot of goalies. There have been 3 goaltenders with the last name Johnson and 1 with the last name Johnston. So any goaltender coming up named Johnson, they have to play for the Blues at least for a game or for half a season. They have to. Now, when it came to lost assets, it's a really, really full column. And it's funny because there have been teams where I've been like, I could probably find a couple. I'd probably find a couple under here. For St. Louis, where do you start? Adam Oates, who they traded to Boston. As a Bruins fan, thanks St. Louis for that. Scott Stevens, that was a major one. Chris Pronger, he went on and won a Stanley Cup in 2007 with Anaheim. Doug Gilmour, traded off to Calgary. The depth they lost to Vancouver, and you can look at the Ronning Courtnall deal. Momesso came to Vancouver. Robert Dirk was a nice depth defenseman Vancouver acquired as well. And then, of course, Jeff Brown in 94 was traded in order for them to get Peter Nedved. Nedved wasn't worth it at the time, I thought, and sure enough, Jeff Brown played a major role in the Canucks going to the Stanley Cup Finals in 94. Curtis Joseph, that's from the Mike Keenan era, where Joseph was like, okay, I've had enough of this crap, I'm out of here. Wayne Gretzky, they bring him in as a rental, and then Gretzky ends up deciding not to stay in St. Louis. which was really kind of a shame because Gretzky and Hull over a full season together, that could have been fun to watch. You have maybe the best setup man in hockey history in Gretzky and one of the best goal scorers in history with Hull. We will never know what they would have done over a full season together. Rod Brind'Amour, another one. He went to Philadelphia. He had a pretty good career after he left St. Louis. Joey Mullen, pretty good career after he left St. Louis. It is a long list. St. Louis, there are other guys I could have listed. I just ran out of room. Short-term coach Jimmy Roberts in 1997 coached 9 games. He was 3-3-3. In 1972, Sid Abel coached 10 games. He was 3-6-1. 1993, Bob Plager coached 11 games. He was 4-6-1. So 9, 10, and 11. 3 pretty short-term coaches. Now, among retired players who lead in wins and in points career that are not in the Hall of Fame, Brian Sutter is the leading point getter, 636 as a member of the St. Louis Blues. And I got to be honest, Brian Sutter, he's definitely video worthy all in and of himself. While I did do the video on all the Sutter brothers, I could definitely do one just on Brian Sutter as well. And I would include his coaching career too. Mike Liut is the leader among wins all time for St. Louis with 151. It's very surprising to me that St. Louis doesn't have a goaltender with more than 151 wins. Jake Allen is close. Allen theoretically gets there next year if he stays in St. Louis, but that's all in theory, and so we'll see whether or not he gets there. And it would be odd if Jake Allen was the all-time leader in wins for St. Louis, considering the amount of negativity that's been attached to his name over the last, I'll say, 3 seasons. Longest drought this franchise has had, 3 seasons, from 2006 to 2008, and this is a team that when they've been down, they haven't stayed down for long. So they went through that somewhat of a rebuild there, and then they got better, and a lot better, and Stanley Cup. Year 1, 67-68, they had a record of 27-31-16, 70 points, and of course they went to the Stanley Cup Finals for the first of 3 straight Stanley Cup Final appearances. Now, that's the only year of those 3 years they were below 500. And of course, that's, as an expansion team being below 500, it's kind of expected. I know I see a Vegas. I'm just saying it's kind of expected that an expansion team will probably lose more than they win until now. Year 11, 77-78, they had an actual worse record than their expansion year of 20-47-13, 53 points. But again, they didn't spend 3 or more years out of the playoffs during that era. 78, that's a year after ownership takes over with, I think it was $8 million in debts I was reading. I will link to the video. I've done a video on St. Louis almost being moved to Saskatoon. I'll link to that video at the end of this one, because I've done a video on that. Lowest points percentage against any one team. Against Montreal, they had a winning percentage of .357. Goals for per game. Their lowest is against the Minnesota Wild at 2.47 goals per game. Goals against per game, the highest is against Montreal, 3.71. Not really a surprise. They've struggled against Montreal historically, considering how good Montreal was during the 60s and 70s. And, of course, right into the early 80s. So not really a huge surprise there. Lowest points per game played. And, again, this is a minimum of 100 games played. Cam Janssen, .055. Not known as a point scorer, Mr. Janssen, but he was a tough customer. Matt Walker, .063. Tony Twist, he was kind of tough as well, .071. Reed Lowe, tough as well, .076. And Scott Nickel, .082. Lowest save percentage among goaltenders who played a minimum of 50 games for the St. Louis Blues. Ed Staniowski, .871. Phil Muir, .875. Ed Johnston, .880. And Greg Millen with an .880 save percentage. I could have put Mike Liut up there. Liut went to Hartford in a deal that brought back Greg Millen and Mark Johnson, but Mark Johnson, sorry. But I thought, no, I've already used up all that room, so I'm just mentioning Liut now. Because, yes, when he was traded to Hartford, that benefited the Whalers. Absolutely. Goalie with the best name. They have Staniowski. They had Cody Radkowski as well. A couple fun names there. And, of course, Jason Bakashewa. Bakashewa is a great name because the first time I saw it, I was like, pardon? And so it took a few times for me to, okay, Bakashewa. All right, I get it. But it is fun trying to say it when you don't have somebody telling you how to say it, because it looks like Bakashahua. I'm like, why is there a hua at the end? I don't understand. But St. Louis, they've been through a lot, and so when they won the Cup last year, even as a Bruins fan, I couldn't really be mad at them over it. I couldn't, claim that they'd been a dirty team to get there or that they didn't earn the Stanley Cup. St. Louis was really, really impressive. And so while this video talks about their overall downbeats and just how many Hall of Fame players have left this team, they are the most recent Stanley Cup winner at the time I'm recording this. And therefore, it does make a lot of this softer, because if they had lost that Stanley Cup Finals against the Boston Bruins, I would have up there the fact that they'd been to 4 Stanley Cup Finals and haven't won as being kind of a low point. But they have won, and we'll see whether or not they can win any more. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will talk to you again soon.